Have you heard the new Cannibal Corpse Chaos Horrific? How are they so heavy after all these many years? Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, John Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's Riff of the Week. Which bands that have been around as long as Cannibal Corpse have managed to stay as heavy as when they started? We all know bands that started out super heavy, and then as their career progressed and they became veterans, they changed their sound, or they got more artsy, or they got more mainstream. And then, of course, there's other bands that never changed their sound. They do the exact same thing as they used to do, but somehow now it lacks the ferocity that it used to have. Cannibal Corpse is one of the few bands that have avoided that fate. They're still every bit as heavy as when they were young, and in some ways, maybe they're even a little bit heavier. And I've been wondering to myself for a long time now how they're able to do that, even though they're getting into their 50s. So this episode, I'm going to take a stab at a few reasons why.
Okay. Oh, what are you doing?
What the? Okay, I get it. Oh, Jesus.
Number one, they love and appreciate the fans. It's well documented the attitude that they've displayed towards the fans over the years.
You know, they come to the show, they're not outcasts, they're not misfits, everybody accepts them. There's people that look like just a normal average Joe Schmo person there, but they're there to see the band. They know the songs, you're part of the crew, you're with us. You feel like, you know, you're part of a family, you know, everybody is there for one reason.
But it's one thing to say nice things in interviews and documentaries. To show appreciation to the fans with deeds, that's another thing. For instance, when I saw them last December in Athens, the lineup on the show was Cannibal Corpse, Dark Funeral, Immolation, and Black Anvil. That's 3 legendary bands and 1 up-and-coming band on one bill, and the ticket cost me $35. You can see them on tour right now. They're touring with Mayhem, and Mayhem is the OG of OG bands. $50 for that ticket. I feel like they could charge a lot more on their status alone, but they don't. And speaking of fans, number 2, they themselves are also fans. Fans of metal. Listen to them in recent interviews talk about other bands, and they're still bringing up the same bands as what they used to back in the day. They're still talking about Possessed, King Diamond, Death. Every time they go on tour, they always bring along another OG of the scene with them, and then they also always bring along some up-and-coming band. Like last year when they brought along 200 Stab Wounds, which was huge for that band. Cannibal stays deep in the scene, and they're always supporting the next generation. Number 3, Eric Rutan. Rob Zombie once said that Black Sabbath invented heavy metal, but Metallica perfected it. Well, back in the day when death metal was first getting started, those bands and studios didn't really know. They hadn't established any techniques on how to properly record such distorted and fast music with clarity. So that early sound was developed by Morris Sound Studios and those early bands. So Morris Sound invented how to record death metal, and Eric Rutan perfected it. Eric has produced all of Cannibal's most recent records, totaling 5 now with Chaos Horrific. So even a long time before he was a full-fledged member of the band, he's been intimately involved with the OG members, helping them to dial in their sound and capture what it is that they want on the record. He's been there along the way for their musical journey. And now that he's a full-fledged member, you add his talent in on top of that. I mean, Eric was in Morbid Angel. His own band is Hate Eternal. So he's a legend in his own right, even before joining Cannibal Corpse. And speaking of the members of Cannibal Corpse, number 4, their rhythm section. Their rhythm section just does not get enough credit in my opinion. Paul Mazurkiewicz and Alex Webster pioneered. They laid down the blueprint for what rhythm sections in death metal bands should do. I mean, yeah, Paul is widely considered still, even to this day, one of the best drummers in death metal, but I don't think he gets enough credit as a pioneer. And I think that Alex Webster should be just as highly regarded as Cliff Burton in the metal pantheon. Number 5, Corpsegrinder. And I really don't have a lot to say here. I just don't see George being or even wanting to be any other way. I don't see him getting old and becoming unsatisfied as an artist. I don't see him wanting to start a blues band or do a side rock and roll project. I mean, have you heard his solo album?
Bring on the bloodshed!
And speaking of side projects, number 6, and I think this might be one of the biggest reasons. All the members of Cannibal Corpse have side projects. Even Paul, who famously on the Cannibal Corpse documentary Centuries of Torment, he famously said that he wouldn't play in any other band besides Cannibal Corpse. Even he has now 2 different side projects that are more rock and roll oriented. Alex Webster has been in numerous side projects, including the super weird Blotted Science, and I just think a bass player of his immense talent and creativity really needs a side project to get weird on. When these guys need a creative outlet outside of death metal, they have a place to do that. Meanwhile, look at Metallica. If James wants to stretch himself creatively as an artist, or maybe he wants to get a little bluesy, he doesn't have a side project to do that in. So what happens? Metallica gets bluesy. Well, Cannibal Corpse doesn't have that problem. When they want to stretch themselves as artists, they have a place to do that. And when it's time to write Cannibal Corpse songs, they do that. So now we obviously got to do a Cannibal Corpse song for this week's Riff of the Week. But before I name this week's Riff of the Week, I want to know what you think. Tell me in the comments. Do you agree or disagree with my 6 points here? Do you have any points that you would like to add to this discussion? Because I'm sure this isn't all of the reasons. Let me know. And if you're not on YouTube, don't worry. All of my social media links are in the description. Let's talk about it. And this week's Riff of the Week is Bloodblind. Off their new album, Chaos Horrific, that drops this Friday, September the 22nd. Make sure you go out and get that. And if you missed the episode I recorded about seeing a Cannibal Corpse concert around Christmas time, and you're on YouTube, just click right here and you can catch that. If you're not on YouTube, links in the description. But most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I love you.